TNA Impact Wrestling has long been viewed as a poor man's WWE. Since its inception, many have suggested that the promotion doesn't hold a candle to its much more well-known competitor. But gradually, things are beginning to change, largely thanks to the promotion moving with the times, which is more than can be said for some of its bigger rivals. Today, we're discussing 5 ways in which TNA is better than WWE. Stay with us. First up, we're discussing those backstage segments. Stay with us. The WWE's backstage segments can only really be described as infuriating. They seem to take place without most people even knowing what is going on. We only have to look at examples over the years as evidence of this. At the beginning of the last decade, there was a segment featuring Damien Sandow and Cody Rhodes. Rhodes managed to cajole Sandow outside to retrieve his money in the bank contract, but he ended up having to jump into the Gulf of Mexico to get his hands on it. Of course, he couldn't swim, but instead of asking the cameraman for help, who appeared to be right next to him, he completely ignored him. This came just after Rhodes had clearly acknowledged the camera to force Sandow to come outside, which was simply frustrating for the viewer. TNA, on the other hand, have decided to go about their backstage segments a little differently, by literally hiding their cameramen. This means the viewer is able to get a good grasp on what the bad guys are plotting without them actually knowing that we know. Not acknowledging the camera means that the wrestlers don't have to awkwardly stand around, half facing the camera and half facing each other. TNA's formula is refreshing, and it simply serves to make the WWE's approach feel as though it is somewhat stuck in the past. What do you guys make of how they do things backstage at TNA? Let us know below. Next up, we're talking about an annoying WWE face trait. Stay tuned. When WWE stars turn from heel to face, they somehow appear to acquire magical powers almost immediately. Having previously been bogged down by their bad guy personas, it seems as though a weight has been lifted off of their shoulders, and they suddenly become invincible, showing no fear in being able to blitz through a ring full of villains in record time. Of course, this isn't quite the case over at TNA Impact, as WWE stars such as Randy Orton and John Cena have in the past been guilty of this particular trait, overcoming almost insurmountable odds to get the better of his opponents. It is also the same when roles are reversed, which eventually takes its toll on the viewer. This sort of thing might occasionally happen at TNA, but nowhere near with the same regularity as it occurs in WWE. Of course, there is always the risk that TNA could go too far the other way and make their faces too human, but it's probably safe to also assume that most wrestling fans would prefer this than watching one man demolish everyone in his path all the time, which does nothing to help criticisms of the whole thing being fake by non-pro wrestling fans. What do you guys make of the WWE and this particularly annoying habit of theirs? Give us your thoughts in the comments. We're talking about the amount of time you need to invest next. Don't go anywhere. It's no secret that in order to keep up to date with what's going on in the world of WWE, you need to invest some serious time. In 1 week alone, the company offers an insane amount of coverage. Of course, there's the traditional Monday Night Raw, as well as SmackDown, which takes up 5 hours straight off the bat. When you throw in things like NXT, NXT UK, NXT Level Up, Main Event, and then the monthly pay-per-views, it is simply too much. If you miss one show, you could end up missing out on an important storyline, and this makes it difficult to become fully invested in what's going on. There is so much WWE content nowadays that if you were to watch everything on offer back-to-back, it would take up more than 2 weeks of your year, which is pretty crazy. Impact, on the other hand, doesn't have this problem. There is less than half of the content on offer compared with WWE, which makes it much easier to follow, and with less pay-per-view events, it is also much cheaper. What do you guys make of the sheer amount of content on offer at WWE? Let us know below. Next, we're discussing GMs. Stay with us. Back in the early part of the 2010s, Hulk Hogan was installed as GM at TNA, which at the time made perfect sense. As much as his character might have become a complete parody in the wrestling world, he was a fair general manager, and it was also completely believable that he would be in charge of a wrestling promotion. Granted, the promotion went through some troubles in the mid to late 2010s, but they seem to be back on track nowadays. Contrast this with the WWE's choice of GMs down the years, and it is a completely different ballgame. With a long history of installing general managers who make little to no sense, WWE have long been accused of installing power-hungry GMs who have little interest in bettering the promotion, only their self-interest, going as far back as Vicky Guerrero and Brad Maddox. However, with a recent retirement of Vince McMahon, it is likely that Triple H will install someone with the company's best interest at heart, which will be a refreshing change from what has come in the past. Who has been the best GM in WWE history in your opinion? Give us your thoughts below. And now, we're talking about Impact's much better humor. It's no secret the wrestlers aren't the funniest of people. Some of the attempted humor in the past over at WWE has bordered on downright terrible, so much so that across the entire pro wrestling industry, there's a solid argument to say that their humor is almost certainly the worst. When you contrast this with TNA's, then it's a completely different ballgame, and in general, TNA's is pretty painless, especially if you guys remember the unbelievably bad storyline of Hornswoggle learning to talk from Santa Claus. I mean, what? Then there was the great Khali attempting to speak English, as well as Jerry Lawler's jokes, which should really be consigned to the 80s, where they belong. Of course, Impact might not have the iconic moments that WWE has become so famed for, but at least they don't subject their audience to some of the absolute worst humor on all of TV. What do you guys make of the humor across both promotions? And who is the funniest wrestler in history in your opinion? Next up, we're discussing how Vince McMahon's recent retirement has gone down backstage. Following McMahon's announcement earlier this summer that he would be stepping down, there was an outpouring of praise and support for the former boss from wrestlers past and present, who seemingly didn't grasp the magnitude of the situation facing the founder. However, since then, it's safe to say that Triple H has revamped the product somewhat, bringing some old faces back into the fold, which has had positive effects behind the scenes. Levesque, as head of creative and EVP of talent relations, has stamped his own authority on the company, and renowned pro wrestling journalist Dave Meltzer has recently suggested that McMahon was actually a hindrance on the company, especially the last few years. He has also claimed that many WWE stars are better off without the former boss, saying, "People sort of speculated and everything, but when you see the difference in the mood over here, I think it's a better product." Of course, there are still those who had a good relationship with McMahon who aren't particularly happy, but Meltzer believes that on the whole, things are better across the board with Triple H in charge. He finished by saying, "A whole lot of the weird Vinceisms are gone that didn't need to be there. A lot of the weird stupidity is out the window," which is probably a good thing. Where do you stand on this? And finally, another former WWE star has headed to Impact. Stay tuned. WWE to Impact is a path well trodden, and over this past weekend, another former WWE wrestler made his way across to Impact, making his promotional debut. Friday's Impact event in Dallas, Texas, saw Grand Metalik make his first appearance at his new home, picking up a win against Alex Zane in the process. After the live event, Metalik, real name Mascara Dorada, took to Twitter to thank the promotion for giving him another chance. But we are so far none the wiser whether it will be a short-term or long-term deal. It is possible that he will be on a show-by-show type contract, so we will have to wait and see what happens in that regard. The former Lucha Libre wrestler turned out for the WWE between 2016 and 2021 in the Cruiserweight division, whilst also appearing as one-third of Lucha House Party. What do you guys make of Grand Metalik appearing at Impact? As usual, thanks for dropping by today, and remember to swing by again next time for some more fun reveals. Bye guys.